Welcome to Cinema Convos. This is the show where we bring guests with different tastes in film. I'm your host, Yash. I'm here with my producer, Zach, and our special guest, Nikhil. And today we are discussing the film The Dark Knight from 2008, directed by Christopher Nolan, starring Christian Bale, Aaron Eckhart, and Heath Ledger. Before we get started, I wanted to issue a quick spoiler warning. We will get into the plot points of this movie, and if you haven't seen it, then you should definitely check out the movie first. And with that, we'll start with our first question for Nikhil, which is, what's your first memory or best memory with this movie?
So my first memory, whenever I think of this movie, the first thing that comes to mind is always the opening scene, the bank robbery heist. Because that is definitely one of the better tone setters for a movie I think I've ever seen. It really immerses you into the movie immediately, tells you what to expect from it, what to feel from it. I think it's also a great introduction to Joker as well. So I remember that is just such a good opening scene, and it really sets the tone for the rest of the movie. And at that point, I think that's just honestly one of the standouts of the movie. Everything about it. It's very unpredictable, especially you never know when the crew starts turning on each other, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the Joker reveal at the end is just incredible. I think they did a really good job on that. It was kind of introducing us to the character without us knowing that's him at first. So it really sets a blank slate. There's no previous notions because we don't know that's Joker yet.
3 of a kind. Let's do this.
That's it? 3 guys?
2 guys on the roof. Every guy gets a share. 5 shares is plenty.
6 shares. Don't forget the guy playing the job.
He thinks he can sit it out and still take a slice. I know why they call him the Joker.
So why do they call him the Joker? I heard he wears makeup. Makeup? Yeah, to scare people. War paint.
So I think they did a good job just setting up that whole thing. I'm curious what y'all's thoughts on that scene were too.
Yeah, Zach, do you want to share?
I'm pretty sure I saw this in the theater when it came out, when I was 12 or something. I don't really remember this movie very much when I watched it in the theater. I watched it again a couple of years back, and I just didn't remember how dark it was. Holy shit, this is a dark movie. This is really dark. I really do think that the Nolan trilogy was proving just how dark superhero movies could get. Especially the Batman movies, but all superhero movies just had sort of a level of camp. This took all of that out, and it's just darkness. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful. And then on the bank robbery scene, as you were saying, Nikhil, it is a tone setter. It really shows you this is what you're in for. And, you the audience knew, if you saw the last movie, you knew what the focus of this movie was. It's the one about the Joker. The Joker's coming, they set that up in the last movie. Yeah, he's coming. This is about the Joker. But you weren't quite sure how he was going to make his entrance. And boy, did he make a grand entrance. It really is a tone setter. This really sets you in store. It is darker than the first one. And I think they really set that up, established that in that very first scene where a bank robbing crew comes brandishing guns in innocent civilians and then starts killing each other. It's the kind of movie you're in for, folks.
Yeah, for sure. One of my big regrets in life, as far as movie goes, is not seeing The Dark Knight in theaters. If it's ever re-released, I will strongly consider going to see it in the theater. I think it's already been released once for its 10-year anniversary, but maybe again if it happens again. So for me, I watched Batman Begins around when it came out. I was fairly young. I was 8 or 9. And I remember as a kid, I thought Batman Begins was fairly boring. But now I love it. But I thought it was I was a kid. So I'm I want action scenes. I don't want origin story stuff. But then I remember I watched this movie. It came out in 2008, right? So I watched it in 2011 or 12, I think. Right before Dark Knight Rises came out at my friend's house. Because now I knew that this was going to be a whole big trilogy. So I remember watching it at one of my friend's house, and I just was so blown away by this movie. I'm pretty sure I picked up my Blu-ray copy the next week after watching it and watched it again. I just loved it so much, and then I was just patiently waiting a few months for The Dark Knight Rises. It wasn't that much of a wait for me, luckily. But yeah, one thing I often tell people about this movie and why I love it so much is that it's one of those movies that from the second it starts to the second it finishes, it just grabs you. It does not let go for a single second. I think the bank robbery scene is one of the best openings in probably all of cinema, and it really sets the tone for the movie well. One thing about that scene that I didn't even notice the first time is that it's a mob bank, which I think is really interesting. Yeah. The Joker is trying to take over, he's trying to be the alpha in the criminal world too. It's a great scene for a great movie. But yeah, as far as watching it the first time, it was just at my friend's house. That's kind of a memorable experience, 3 years after the movie had already been out. But I remember, this is a trilogy I watch again and again. I watched it once last year. I've already watched it once in the quarantine. I think I'm on my second rewatch of it. I just love it so much. When I started, I have to finish it. So good. And I think as Zach was mentioning, superhero movies used to be, they were kind of new, and then people thought they were like campy and fun, which was also great. But The Dark Knight, to this day, is the movie that it's the gold standard for superhero movies. It showed what it can be. For example, when Logan came out, it was a lot of people were calling it The Dark Knight for X-Men. Like, it's every great superhero movie is compared to The Dark Knight in some capacity, which I think is really shows how impactful it was and still is.
Or when I saw it in the theater too, and I was, I think, maybe 10 years old when I saw it. So I definitely didn't, on my first watch, I definitely didn't get a lot of like the deeper aspects of this movie. I just captured a lot more of the surface aspects, especially since I was so young. And as over the years, as I rewatched it more and more times, I slowly began to see all the sort of deeper layers into it. For instance, like when I first saw it, I had no idea what the mob was,
Right.
or like anything, or like those sort of matters. So I was a bit lost on that. But yeah, definitely, this is definitely a movie that as you rewatch over the years, you definitely see more and more. There's just so many layers to it. I really think Christopher Nolan did a good job kind of setting up the structure with things like that, for instance.
And I think that's a recurring theme in Christopher Nolan movies, and goes to the writing style, because he frequently works with his, I think, brother, Jonathan Nolan.
Yeah,
I want to say. The thing that makes a lot of these movies rewatchable is, The Dark Knight is probably the least complex in terms of like concept out of all of his movies. It's pretty straightforward, but like there's every piece of dialogue is so important, and you catch a lot of things. The story comes together nicely when you watch it again and again. And I think in general, when you watch any of his films again, you appreciate something new the next time, which I think shows that he's a great filmmaker.
Yeah, he's definitely been. I think I'd say this is definitely my favorite Christopher Nolan movie.
Well, there are some days where I said this is my favorite movie, period. So it's it's definitely my favorite Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
But I have appreciation for all three movies in the trilogy, which we'll get more into those later on. But we'll focus on The Dark Knight for now.
You just couldn't let me go, could you? This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object.
Okay, Nikhil, so I know you've mentioned you really like the opening scene in this movie, and you've mentioned a couple of other small things, but I was wanting to ask you, what are some of your favorite aspects of the movie? And it can really be anything. What stands out to you the most?
Honestly, one of the quickest ways for me to really like instantly become enamored and like enjoy a movie is to have a good villain. Like, a good villain really like elevates a movie so much for me, in my opinion. That's one of the fastest ways to do it. And Joker, like, to this day, is one of my like top all-time movie villains. Like, he's at least top 3, maybe even higher than that. And every scene he's in is he's just an absolute scene stealer. Like, your eyes are glued to the screen every time he's on the screen. He's such a captivating presence. Heath Ledger does a tremendous job on him. And it's like every time he's there, you're just like wondering, what's he gonna do next? He's so wildly unpredictable, and just, you love to hate him, essentially. He's one of those types of characters. And I think Chris Nolan did a great job with him, especially like, I really liked how we didn't learn like too much of his background, for instance. Like, we were like, it was all very vague. It was essentially him and Chris Nolan saying, this is just like an everyday person. This could be anyone, for instance. Like, it wasn't someone who like fell in a vat, like who got superpowers or like nothing like sort of complex backstory. It was just an everyday person who was insane, basically. I really liked what they did with that, for instance. And Joker is by far my favorite aspect of the movie, for instance. I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, I'll bounce on with that real quick, because Heath Ledger in this movie is one of my favorite performances of all time, and it might even be my favorite performance because he's so good. People kind of joke about this movie by saying that the trilogy is Bruce Wayne's story, but The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger's Joker is the main character. Because he runs this movie in every way. Every scene he's in, he's so just diabolical, but so entertaining. Because it's like, if you have an appreciation for, I guess, dark humor, the Joker is hilarious in this movie in many moments, in a very messed up way. He's still doing horrendously like evil things, but he's so much fun to watch. And it's such a good balance.
Little things like pencil trick, for instance.
Yeah, it's like that's a messed up scene, but it's kind of funny in a bizarre way. Because,
Give me one reason why I shouldn't have my boy here pull your head off.
How about a magic trick? I'm gonna make this pencil disappear. Ta-da! It's gone.
out of all Joker portrayals, I still think Heath Ledger is my favorite. I loved Joaquin Phoenix in the
He was great.
most recent portrayal, and of course Mark Hamill whenever he does voice work is exceptional. But Heath Ledger just made the character his own, and it worked so well for the somewhat realistic tone of this franchise.
Something that can be said about Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker is that the Joker has always been, in the comics and the media, he's a madman and a crazy guy. But Heath Ledger really played him unhinged. Really, this is an unstable psychopath, a crazy, it's not a fun crazy. This is real crazy. He's gonna kill people as a joke. Crazy. You really got the unhinged.
It's what's so interesting about this Joker is that, as Nikhil said, we don't know anything about his origin story. He just kind of appears on the scene, which I love. I love seeing different portrayals of the Joker origin story in the mediums I have seen, but in The Dark Knight, you don't need it. You just have to know he's a crazy guy because the performance is just so good. It's funny because at the beginning of the movie, the first time you're watching it, when he does the whole thing, you want to know how I got these scars, he comes up with this story about his drunk father or whatever. But then later on, he tells a completely different story, and it makes you realize he's just saying messed up stuff because he's insane. You don't know. The ambiguity makes it so interesting. I've seen theories about how he might have been a war vet and different things because this movie doesn't confirm any of it, and I love that because you don't need it. And how many villains in cinema are there where you like them this much without their origin story? I don't think there's very many.
Not much, yeah.
So I think it's a really impressive feat of acting, personally.
Yeah, it's something interesting about the Joker, and all across Batman media and all his origin story is always inconsistent. He's always making it up. It's never the real origin story. He's always lying about his origin story. That's a constant thing. And his name is different. You never really learn his real name. Some Batman media had an alias for him, but that doesn't really actually stay consistent throughout all media. That's not true. So we really don't know his actual alias, his actual name. Yeah, his origin story is very inconsistent. He's constantly lying about it. He really is the most well-known Batman villain, but we know the least about him. He's shrouded in mystery. And that's kind of why we love him a little bit.
Yeah, Joker is just, in general, a fascinating character. I remember I read the comic book, The Killing Joke, which was a great comic and a very messy movie adaptation.
It's a bad movie.
Great comic. Great comic.
Yeah.
Meant to be experienced in the comic book medium. It's too short to work for a full movie. They had to add.
I have a lot that I could say about the movie, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I'm not going to just sit here and roast the Killing Joke movie because I want to talk more about the comic.
I'll do
great.
it later. I'll do that later.
But yeah, that's essentially one example of a Joker origin story that's done really well, and it's just so interesting for this movie. You don't need it. It's just because the characters is so interesting right off the bat with the bank robbery scene. Well, while we're on the subject of the cast, we talked about Heath Ledger, but I think because of Heath Ledger, there are many times in this movie where people forget how good Aaron Eckhart is as Two-Face.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
And comic book movies generally, when they try to have two villains, usually it just backfires. Think Spider-Man 3 or something, movies like that. And in The Dark Knight, Two-Face is a result of the Joker's actions, and it works so well. And it sets up so nicely for the next movie. And yeah, Aaron Eckhart is really great in this movie. And it's Heath Ledger's show, but if you watch any comments on YouTube, if it's a scene that centers around Two-Face, almost all the comments say we all forget about how good Aaron Eckhart is in this movie because he's exceptional.
Hello.
Dan, Jesus, I thought you was dead.
Half. Who picked up Rachel words?
Listen, Dan, I swear to God, I didn't know what they were gonna do to you.
That's funny. Because I don't know what's going to happen to you either.
This movie is memorable because it's dark and gritty, which is uncommon at the time. But also just, I think it's so well acted. It's not necessarily like Avengers Endgame, for example. Fantastic movie. Do I love it because the performances are amazing? Not particularly. I like it because of the scope and action and vision of that movie. But in this movie, I think it's The Dark Knight is a technically good movie because it has all the elements of a great movie.
Aaron Eckhart definitely does get overlooked a bit, especially with how good a performance he gave. The good about first 2/3 of the movie, he's this hardworking, DA. He's really trying to make a difference. And all of a sudden, once Rachel dies, this turn in his character is just really a remarkable job he does. And like you seeing everything he's lost, at that point he's just completely unhinged at that point. And this was sort of the Joker's master plan, essentially, to get Gotham's. He said, like to the movie, I'm gonna get Gotham's White Knight. And I'm going to show he can be just like me. I thought they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, the Joker's plans are very elaborate. Do I think, when he, in that scene where he says, like, does it look like I have a plan? And I'm going to say, yeah, you definitely have a plan. You're doing all this, like, elaborate scheming.
He was just straight up lying at that point.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he planned it out so much to where it looked like it was all unplanned. Like, there's no way he was just a guy without a plan. Like, that was all just part of his plan right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I guess since the character of Batman has been, interpreted in so many ways, did either of you want to talk about, I guess, some other mediums you've experienced the character in any way? And you can start with Nikhil and then move on to Zach.
Yeah, I'd first say that Bale Batman is personally my favorite, because that's just the one that I grew up with. So that's when I feel like I kind of know the most. I thought Bale especially did a good job as Bruce Wayne, for instance. I thought, like, he's without a doubt the best Bruce Wayne. As Batman, you can make an argument. I still think he is, but I think he's 100% the best Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne?
What makes you think you can decide who's running Wayne Enterprises?
Well, the fact that I'm the owner.
What are you talking about? The company went public a week ago.
And I bought most of the shares. Through various charitable foundations and trusts and so forth. Look, it's all a bit technical, but the important thing is that my company's future is secure.
I don't know if you guys have played the Arkham games, but I thought
I have.
Batman's he's really good in those as well. I'm not a huge fan of the Affleck Batman. That's just like...
don't be so hard on Batfleck.
I really thought that Bale does a good job. Like you all said, he's one of the performances that gets overlooked in this movie, particularly due to Heath Ledger, for instance. Because you can really see the internal struggle he's going through in the movie, which is like, should I continue as Batman? Because everything that's going on is saying it's my fault. Like, Joker's here because of me. He's doing all his actions because of me. Rachel's dead because of me. So seeing the struggle and saying, like, is it worth continuing? I thought Bale did a really good job of that.
Well, I'll speak on this real quick because I know Zach has a lot to say, and I'll say my 2 cents real quick. I think Christian Bale does a good job, and I think the very first movie, Batman Begins, does a good job of establishing why the character is so broken and why he does the things he does. There's a reason for everything he does, like why he doesn't kill, why he doesn't use guns. It's all explored very well in the first movie. But looking at the character of Batman, I love Christian Bale, obviously. I mean, I think he's exceptional, but it's not necessarily only because of him these movies are great. There's a whole team of people that are working together. And, I think some of the worst Batman movies of all time are the Tim Burton ones and then the Joel Schumacher ones.
Yes, I agree.
The most watchable of those four for me personally is Batman Returns, which is still by no means like a great movie or anything. It has Danny DeVito as the Penguin. And what's her name? Michelle Pfeiffer, I think, as Catwoman.
Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman.
But in the 1989 Batman, the only thing I liked about it was Jack Nicholson as Joker. But the movie itself is pretty boring. And Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, they're memes. They don't even count.
They're not good movies.
Because like Batman Forever had Jim Carrey as Riddler, which he was not bad. But then like Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face is just like it compared to Aaron Eckhart's Two-Face, like it's not even a
good.
And then Arnold is the ice guy or whatever. I don't know, Mr. Freeze.
Ice to see you.
George Clooney is Batman. It's just a whole. Those movies don't count.
It's a meme. Those are bad.
Hi, Freeze. I'm Batman.
I think and then moving on to Ben Affleck, I think he did a decent job. I think he was stuck in like average movies, but he did what he could. And then I'm gonna shout out the Lego Movie Batman as well because that's just hilarious. It's so funny. And I will second the Arkham games are all of them are excellent. The first two, Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, are my favorites. Zach, if you haven't played those, honestly, I think you'd really like them.
I will.
And they're pretty old now, so you can get them cheap.
Marvel, yeah.
Arkham City especially is really, really good. But yeah, I know
True.
Zach had something to say, more to say about the animated series. So let him
Okay.
get into that. Just don't spoil it.
Let's talk about the animated series.
Go for
I
it.
think that is some of the best portrayals of Batman outside of the comics is the animated series. I think if you call yourself a Batman fan, you really need to get well versed in the animated series because it laid a lot of the groundwork for a lot of what other Batman media now is working with now.
Do you have to have a subscription to watch it?
The animated series, The New Adventures, and Beyond, which is also great. Batman Beyond is also great, but that's holding the HBO Max, I'm pretty sure.
Speaking of the
Batman the animated series,
real quick, while you mentioned Batman Beyond, I have seen Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, the movie, which is also a Joker portrayal, and I think that's a solid movie. But I need to check out the series. Anyways, you can go on.
This series is really good. But no, I like Batman. So it really captured that feel that they were trying for. Kind of based the series off the Tim Burton Batmans, but they made them a heck of a lot better because the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher ones were trying to capture kind of a cartoony vibe while being live action. The animated one was able to do that a lot better, but was able to bridge the gap better between that cartoonishness and drama by way of being a cartoon. It did that a lot better. It does have that kind of noir feel. It feels like you're sort of in the 30s, but you feel like you're in the future at the same time. It's a weird kind of thing. You feel like it's almost timeless. Yeah, a lot of the villains in the show, specifically Penguin, Two-Face, Joker, and Poison Ivy, a lot of them are based on or even influenced the portrayals in the Burton and Schumacher movies. So it is pretty close to that.
Oh, please, call me Poison Ivy. You see, Harvey had to pay for his crime.
What crime?
Why, murder, of course. Plowing up a field of beautiful wildflowers for that silly penitentiary of his. This little rose would be extinct today if I hadn't saved my precious from those horrible bulldozers. The blood of those flowers are on his hands. So his fate was sealed with a kiss.
And also the animated series also gave us Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn did not originate from the comics. Harley Quinn originated from the animated series.
It's awesome. Because Harley Quinn is now an established character in the DC universe in many ways. She's also in the Arkham games. She has her own movie, Birds of Prey, which is pretty solid. I saw it with Nikhil actually before the world went crazy. One of the 10 movies I saw in those 3 months of pre-quarantine. But yeah, cool.
You can thank the animated series for that. And
I need to check out the animated series for sure.
He also gave Mr. Freeze a rather tragic backstory. He gave him that in the series because he was kind of a joke, honestly, before this, and they gave him a tragic backstory where you feel for him.
Yeah.
And also something more on the point about Two-Face. We're talking about Two-Face. I like his backstory here. I like his reasoning here in The Dark Knight. I like that he's driven to insanity. Almost, he's driven to evil after doing so much good by the Joker. I do like that backstory, but that backstory really isn't that faithful to the comics, though. No, it's not.
Well, I mean, Nolan took a lot of liberties with the whole trilogy in terms of
he really did.
Bane is completely different in the next one.
Bane is very different.
A lot of them are completely different. I don't know which I like better, but I like the one in the animated series, which is the same as the comics, which essentially he wasn't driven crazy. He'd always been crazy. He'd always had an evil side that he was keeping down. So he did so much good as the DA, and by only showing his good, the longer he kept his evil side down, the more it came out and became him. And in the series, there's a 2-episode arc about him trying to keep his evil side down, and then there's some kind of fire accident, like there is in the movie, where he burns half his face off, and so he's literally on the surface both his good and his evil side. And the reason and how he keeps his good and evil side in check is by flipping a coin, leaving up to chance.
Yeah.
So I just think that's really great.
Big Bad Harv?
Speaking.
It appears you and Harvey are having trouble again.
The guy's a wimp.
Well, Harvey has special problems. When he was young, he felt very guilty about his angry feelings. So guilty that he hid them deep inside until they became an illness. You, Big Bad Harv, represent these angry feelings. Everyone feels anger, and it does no harm, as long as it doesn't result in bad behavior. Once Harvey understands this...
Then maybe I'll go away. Right?
Well...
I'm going nowhere, Missy. If anyone's leaving, it's Mr. Goody-Good.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the character of Two-Face, it brings to light one of the most, like, unsettling themes of this movie is that he's a good guy at first, like, in every way possible. He's fighting for the right thing and trying to get crime off the streets, and it just makes you wonder, like, it begs the question, does every human being have that ticking point that can make them become a bad person? And it's hard to say because, like, you think about yourself, like, I cannot ever see myself doing, like, violent acts, obviously, but it's like, when you go through that much, can it change? Can something go off in your mind, you know?
You can tell that in the movie Joker is really trying to get the same out of Batman. His backstory, I was like, all it takes is one bad day. And
Yeah.
that's, you see that happen in this movie, essentially, with Two-Face especially. Just
Yeah, and also by the end of it, like, Batman eventually does have to break his code. He has to kill Two-Face to save Jim Gordon's son.
Yeah.
That's all the Joker ever wanted. As soon as he could make Batman break his code, you know something is gonna affect Batman adversely in some way, and that's all he wanted. Like, there's that one scene where he's like, if Batman hits him with his, like, bat pod, then the Joker wins in some way.
Even when at the end when he's like Joker's falling and like Batman grapples him, catching him, you can tell how disappointed Joker is. Like, he got me. He really wanted me.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has to save him because it's his code. He has to go by his code. I feel like that's what drives Joker the most, is that code of his.
Well,
I think it's interesting in that line where he says that, like, as he's dangling off the side of that building, it's like, you're not gonna kill me, like, because of your, like, code, and I'm not gonna kill you because, like, it's too fun to have you around. I thought that was really interesting.
You won't kill me out of some misplaced sense of self-righteousness. And I won't kill you because you're just too much fun. I think you and I are destined to do this forever.
Yeah, and during that whole situation, this movie definitely explored a lot of different themes of morality, and the scene where there's those two boats, one full of convicts and one full of regular citizens, and the way they're all fleeing, it ends up making sense because of what's going on in the city. But it's just, like, such an interesting, like, question to ask yourself. Like, it's almost like a analogy for the death penalty, right? It's like, do these people deserve to die because of what they've done, or like, and it means like saving us, and then I don't know. It's just that whole scene blew me away because it was so intense. First of all, you're really, like, hoping neither of these boats do it. Then you're like, wait, the Joker's gonna blow both of them up, and that's not good either. So it's just, yeah. I mean, this movie is very intense all the way through. It's like a 2.5-hour movie, and it's the perfect middle chapter. It has enough to hold its own. You can watch it by itself, but if you're watching the whole trilogy, it's really rewarding to watch this, see what this movie, the perfect middle chapter for any trilogy. It puts the characters in a compromising position by the end of it, but it also has enough substance on its own. It's not just setting up for the next one. One trilogy I was rewatching recently that does that really well also is the New Planet of the Apes trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
I've been rewatching those recently, actually, with my parents, and the second movie is, I won't spoil it here, but it does something similar in how it moves the story forward, but also sets up for the next one.
Yeah, the second one of those is, I think, the Apes trilogy is probably my favorite one.
Yeah, I mean, I love all three of those as well. It's one of my favorite trilogies. But the Dark Knight trilogy is my top trilogy. But, there's the Apes, the Lord of the Rings, another great example. Yeah. Two Towers does it really well. The Bourne trilogy is really good. I watched those again recently.
Watch that. I've seen the first one.
Yeah, the second and third Bourne movies are really good.
Hangovers as well,
The Hangover is not a...
Second one's the strongest. Everyone knows that.
I mean, the second one just does the same thing and just makes it gross.
We're going a bit back.
That's what a good middle chapter does.
Just make it gross.
little bit. Obviously, the Star Wars original trilogy. I think that's another good example.
Yeah, Empire Strikes Back does the same thing.
Yeah,
We just talked about Empire not too long ago, actually, on the show. But yeah, it's like by the end of it, the people are not in a good spot. But it's a great movie. It's my favorite Star Wars movie, so it's from my favorite trilogy from that franchise.
Speaking of when they were talking about that on the boat, I love the scene where it was the boat with the convicts on it, and there's one that convict like hand me the detonator, and I'm gonna do something that you should have done a long time ago. He's gonna hit it, but he just throws it out the window.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that scene.
I was very happy. Yeah.
And if I could bring just one other thing up.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, when we're talking about, I guess we're talking about with Two-Face, about how the Joker drives him crazy, just to kind of show that anyone
can go bad.
Anyone can be corrupted too.
Yeah.
That's very similar to the Joker's plan in the Killing Joke, actually.
Mm-hmm.
If I could talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
I might end up spoiling a little bit of it, but
that's fine.
Does anybody actually want to watch or read it? I mean, it's classic. It's a classic comic, not a good movie, but
it's a great read. It's not. Don't put yourself through the movie.
The movie is pretty faithful, except for about a half-hour unnecessary romance arc that I'm really unhappy exists. I'm not gonna say who it's with, but
it's because I won't say who it's with, but it's like
you can say who it's with.
The comic is like 50.
It's Batman and Batgirl. Why the hell are they a romantic item in that movie? It's like her dad.
It's like a 50-page comic, and if they made a faithful movie of it, it'd probably be like half an hour because there's not much. But they want to make an hour and 15-minute movie to make it, a movie, and
make it R-rated too. And they made it R-rated.
Yeah, and they don't do much with the R rating, to be honest.
No, they don't. It's the violence. I think it's mainly that one scene.
Yeah.
Like, how you know the scene I'm talking about? The scene.
Yeah.
So kind of what I'm talking about, the Killing Joke, how he's trying to drive Gordon insane so he can show anyone can be corrupted, even the best of us.
I've proven my point. Gordon's been driven mad. I've demonstrated there's no difference between me and everyone else. All it takes is one bad day.
Like you said with what he did with Gordon, he basically did the same thing with Harvey Dent in the movie.
Absolutely,
well, Harvey Dent, one of the most diabolical things the Joker does that I don't think Harvey Dent even finds out about until near the end is he switches the addresses on Batman.
Oh yes, yeah.
Because there's no way Batman would go save Harvey Dent over Rachel. He just wouldn't do it. And Harvey Dent, dies thinking that they made me the priority. I mean, Rachel dies with Harvey Dent thinking that I was a top priority and they just didn't care about her at all. And I think that's where he was really set off from that point forward. And the first time I saw that scene, it's moving on to some of my favorite moments in this movie. I think that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie because the Joker is breaking out of prison while they're also trying to save these two people somehow. And it's just, I had no idea Rachel was going to die in this movie. That's one of the spoilers I had avoided for 3 years. So I was just shocked when I saw that. And I'm like, wow, they recasted her and then they killed her off. Just
I know. It's
not a fan of this character. But for me, it's that scene, and then I love the ending. I love the speech is a little hokey, but I love it. Gary Oldman saying he's a Dark Knight, it gives me chills every time with the score and everything about it is just is a perfect ending.
You have to hunt him. He's not the hero Gotham. He's the hero Gotham deserves, not the hero he needs right now.
Why is he running, Dad?
Because we have to chase him.
Okay, we're going in. Go!
He didn't do anything wrong.
Because he's the hero Gotham deserves, but not the one it needs right now. So we'll hunt him.
He takes
Batman making the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good, saying I killed those people. And again, real quick, before I ask my next question, I wanted to point out how this movie also explores how police can be corrupt because of the two cops that they help the Joker inadvertently because of their own personal reasons.
Yeah.
And I think it's important when you have a position of authority like that, you have to, be able to put that kind of stuff aside if you're a good fit for that role.
Not just the police, but I feel like there's so much corruption in the movie in general.
And even in the beginning, Harvey Dent warns Jim Gordon, he's like, you have scum like that in your team, are you sure you can trust them?
Yeah.
And then Jim Gordon says yeah, I can trust my team. And if you think about it, like a lot of things could have been prevented if he had more if he hadn't been trying to give so many people a second chance in the police force. But anyways, moving on, I wanted to ask you, Nikhil, is the bank robbery scene your favorite scene, or do you have a favorite scene in this movie outside of that? And why is it your favorite scene? Feel free to break it down.
Oh, okay. That's probably my favorite scene. The
I think I know what scene you're gonna say.
The interrogation scene.
Yep.
Well, that scene is just so good because essentially, like, you see Batman, he's got all this strength, all this like fear he typically has over criminals, but here with Joker, he is absolutely powerless. Try as many scare tactics on him, keep taking all the pain that he's dishing out, and like it's just not phasing him at all. Like to the point where he's literally laughing at one point. I thought that scene was the absolute standout. Was like an absolute standout of the movie. Heath Ledger does a tremendous job, especially with the laugh. It's so good. And
that scene is a true showcase of his acting, I think.
Yeah, and then one of the lines says that you have nothing to threaten me with. Like with all your strength, I feel like this is like one of the few times Batman has ever been in a situation like this where there's nothing he can do. Like everything, typically like this is usually a walk in the park for him, but Joker has the even though he's in prison, Joker is the one with all the power here.
Those mob fools want you gone so they can get back to the way things were. But I know the truth. There's no going back. You've changed things. Forever.
Then why do you want to kill me?
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No. You complete me.
You're garbage. You kills for money.
Don't talk like one of them. You're not.
Yeah, I mean, he beats the Joker to a pulp, but that's not why Joker gives him the information he wants. He has his own intentions in mind.
Yeah.
And, I also love the interrogation scene. I love what follows it, like the whole sequence together, the interrogation and then the chase. Yeah. And during the chase, one of the things the Joker does is he messes with that cop's head and says, in their last moments, people show you who they really are.
Yeah.
And do you want to know which one of your friends were cowards? And he's so good at riling people up.
Yeah.
To get what he wants.
Because the cops had him. He was in jail. Like it was end of story. Yeah. It was so easy for him to get out. He knew what to do exactly.
For sure. Yeah, the interrogation scene is a standout for me as well. But what about you, Zach? What's your favorite scene in this movie?
Interrogation scene's a good scene. I don't know if that's my favorite. I don't know.
It's hard to pick a favorite in this movie.
I guess it was that scene at the party, but it's not just that. There's several other things happening, and they go back and forth between them. So how the Joker kills those two other people.
The commissioner and the judge, right?
Yeah. The police commissioner and the judge, where it was people who said they were cops who have to get out of here, and they hand the envelope and
just says
the bottom of the envelope, which is just insane.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing of the Joker must have known the commissioner was a drinker because he had the poison in his drink.
Yeah.
And that scene where he's drinking and the glass is smoking, that's freaky. And wait. I think my actual favorite scene, just have a shot and it's the one at the funeral march of the police commissioner where they have Joker's henchmen as the cops with the guns ready, aim, fire. And then you can almost see how it's edited. You can see both Bruce and Commissioner Gordon kind of figuring out what's going on in their heads. And they're putting it together at the same time. And so you can see that on the screen of them actually doing that. And I just think that's a really good.
Yeah. We must remember that vigilance is the price of safety.
Stand by. Honor, guard, attention. Hort. Ready? Aim.
Really good scene.
For both of those scenes, what I really admire about them is it's a couple things. It's one, that they're edited in a way, as you said, that they build tension so well within the scene, it's just building on itself until it finally explodes into a big, exciting action scene. And also, one thing about this movie I really like is it shows that there are times where Bruce Wayne needs to appear as Batman, but there are times where he can be himself and also make an impact. And there's a few times where he saves lives as Bruce Wayne, which I think it's really cool to show that it goes back to the fact that this guy doesn't have superpowers. He's just a regular rich guy, if you think about it. But I think those two scenes and most scenes in this movie just do a great job of building tension overall.
Yeah.
Speaking of building tension, The score of this movie is absolutely incredible. I believe it's Hans Zimmer, correct? He's
Yeah,
one of
Hans Zimmer. I think.
the main thing that was like, especially on the Joker scenes, that sort of ringing background sound that steadily builds and builds and builds throughout the scene. I always thought that he did a wonderful job, especially setting up tension, like you said earlier.
Yeah, there's the score in this movie is really good. I mean, it sets the tone for every scene almost perfectly. And one thing I really like about the score in this whole trilogy is that there's a lot of different sounds you'll hear throughout the trilogy that come at similar moments, and it does it so well. And yeah, I mean, the score is fantastic. It elevates the movie for sure. Like to be honest, most of Chris Nolan's movies do involve Hans Zimmer, but even when they don't, the score is always something.
Yeah. Sort of also when Josh, we were talking about Bruce Wayne, sometimes he doesn't have to save people as Batman, he can save as Bruce Wayne. I'm not really sure, and I don't think they really do this a lot in any other Batman media or the Batman movies, but something that does happen in the animated series a lot is that you see him go undercover a lot, especially in the animated series. I just think that's kind of interesting that he doesn't always have to save the day as Batman. He doesn't have to save himself either. He can save the day as anyone he wants. Like, sometimes he'll go undercover so he can get intel. He'll do that. That happens several times in the series.
I just remembered something, actually, now that you mentioned that, because there's also there are 2 Batman games that are the Telltale series from that studio, which is a lot of their games are more like choice based, and you kind of manipulate the story based on your decisions. And in those games, both the Batman games, are actually a lot of moments where you get to choose your approach, and you get to choose if you want to go as Bruce Wayne or as Batman, depending on, they give you the pros and cons of both. And I think that's kind of a cool way that the Batman universe has incorporated that aspect of the character.
That is super cool.
Yeah, those are good games too if you like more like story oriented.
In
general, anything that Telltale has made, I really like. So shout out Telltale.
That's the next one on this. I'm gonna play the game.
Outside of Aaron Eckhart and Heath Ledger, I want to shout out Christian Bale, just because Christian Bale is an exceptional actor who manipulates his body like no one I've ever seen in my entire life. He's been fat, he's been buff, he's been everything. He played Dick Cheney, he was in Ford versus Ferrari. He's always making these exceptional movies well beyond the Batman trilogy, and great actor for sure. One other person I wanted to mention is I really like Michael Caine as Alfred in this whole trilogy.
He's the best.
He's such a good Alfred. He's really good at being like the father figure in Bruce Wayne's life.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
He's also, a regular in Christopher Nolan movies. He's always making appearances. Yeah,
I feel like his character isn't as prominent here as he is in Batman Begins.
Yeah, I mean, he throughout the trilogy, he's kind of less and less prominent, but
he's probably in the third one.
In the third movie, he's in the first act, and then he he leaves. He's like, look, if you're gonna do this to yourself, I can't watch. But then that scene where he's at his grave is just devastating, and it's like this character definitely develops over the trilogy. And then of course, the Dark Knight Rises ending is when he does the nod at the cafe. I love it. I guess moving on to the rest of the trilogy, I love the Dark Knight, obviously, and most people say this is the best one, and I would agree with that. But I think The Dark Knight Rises is honestly, for me personally, just as good. It's a great film, and I think a lot of people don't like it as much.
I feel like that one gets too much hate. Like, I don't wonder.
It's a great finale, and Tom Hardy as Bane is terrifying in a different way from the Joker. He looks like he can kill you with his bare hands, which is it's not as psychological as the Joker, but I loved Bane, and I loved the message in that movie about losing hope and fighting back and all that. But I love all 3 of these movies, and I think this is one of the few trilogies where anyone can say that one of them is my favorite, and I can totally understand. It really depends on what you like, and for me, it's the second and third it's hard for me to pick one, but I usually go with The Dark Knight just because Heath Ledger is so good. But The Dark Knight Rises, I think, just as great. And I think there's more of a trend to see Batman, and the character of Batman is known to be kind of in a dark universe and gritty universe. And I think that's why I'm excited for what's coming with the Robert Pattinson version. We got the trailer for this year, which is kind of cool. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on what's to come, or even anything about this, anything you want to mention about Batman Begins or Dark Knight Rises.
I really like how Christopher Nolan made sure each one had a solid villain. Because like, you can definitely say that about each movie. Because I thought Liam Neeson does a good job in Batman Begins. Obviously, Heath Ledger in Dark Knight, and then
And then Scarecrow. Scarecrow is
Scarecrow's and Tom Hardy again in Dark Knight Rises. So I really think you can tell he put a lot into making sure each film had a solid villain to really go back on.
Yeah, what I like about this trilogy is that it's clearly inspired by the Batman comics, but it's very much his own vision for the character and
Yeah.
the universe. And I think this is a tough thing to pull off when you change this much from like the source material. It has a lot of the same characters, a lot of the characters have the same names, but it's the best possible effort to make it seem realistic, I guess.
Yeah. Inspired by the comics, but not incredibly.
It's inspired by the comics, but
Yeah.
these are Christopher Nolan's movies 100%.
True. When we're comparing the movies, I can't say I like Batman Begins more than The Dark Knight, but like the villain in Batman Begins, Ra's al Ghul, is probably my favorite Batman villain of all time.
The vigilantes.
No. The vigilante is just a man lost in the scramble for his own gratification. He can be destroyed or locked up. But if you make yourself more than just a man, if you devote yourself to an ideal, and if they can't stop you, then you become something else entirely.
Well, Batman Begins it's a really good origin story. It has everything you'd want from a movie like that.
No, yeah, I was really impressed at how good, because especially watched the Batman animated series over the summer, and then watched the movies. I hadn't seen those since I was a kid, and so they got understanding. Because in the series, they hint at Batman's origins as far as like, and went on a trip around the world and learned all the skills he had to do to become Batman. And they hinted that a little bit in the series, but this really shows it well. And Ra's al Ghul, he really got a really satisfying arc in this movie, or in Batman Begins, because he's one of my favorite. Like I think he's one of Batman's most powerful like villains, and also he's the only one like he respects the hell out of Batman, unlike his other villains, where he really was. I think very highly of you, but I have to kill you.
And one of the most artistic aspects of the trilogy is how a lot of things in Batman Begins become relevant in The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
It all comes together nicely, which I thought was really cool.
It was more like a follow-up to Batman Begins in general than to like both the Batman Begins and the Dark Knight.
Because you could watch The Dark Knight without watching Batman Begins, but if you want to appreciate The Dark Knight Rises, you have to watch both.
Yeah, especially Batman Begins.
But ideally, just watch the whole trilogy because they're all really good movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, one thing I love about this trilogy is I'm pretty sure Chris Nolan has pretty openly said, I just want to make these 3 movies and that's it. Like he's not interested in like just he could easily make a 4th movie with Christian Bale and everyone will go see it. It'd make money, but it's not necessary because it concludes so well.
Yeah,
everything comes and like the little hint with like Robin at the end is good enough to where like it gets you talking, but it's like there's closure. There's enough closure to where. Because he could be Robin, he could be like Nightwing, or like his name is Robin. We don't know what he is, you know. Like there's lots of things you could talk about.
Being the same character, though.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I mean, talking about Dark Knight, I think obviously it's revolutionary as far as like the superhero genre, but most people describe this movie as a crime drama, which I can totally see that.
I can see that. Yeah.
I mean, you know what genre do you think this is more of a superhero movie, or do you think it's more of a crime drama? What would you define it as?
That's a tough one, honestly, because it's definitely elements from both.
Mm-hmm.
I would say superhero movie, but only slightly. I'd say it's like 60% superhero, 40% crime drama.
Yeah, that's fair.
Very, very close. Not like there's, because you could definitely, especially compared to other superhero movies, there's definitely more of the crime, the mob element to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you definitely go dive a bit further into it. And yeah, I think it's a fairly even mix of both 64%. I think if I had to pick a number.
Like, about it being a superhero movie, it's really only a superhero movie because Batman is superhero. These are from superhero comics.
Yeah.
But the Dark Knight on its own is not very much of a superhero movie. Yes, Batman is a superhero, like a vigilante in a cape. If that's your definition of a superhero, it's a superhero movie. It's like the Superman movies where he's this being from an unknown land who can do anything. He's here to save us all. No, he's a guy who has a bunch of gadgets. And he sacrifices. So So I guess he is a superhero. He's a superhero, but like tonally, this isn't much of a superhero movie.
It's much darker.
It is a crime drama, but you can't escape the fact that it is still a superhero movie because of the source material.
Right.
Like this is a related thing. You wouldn't call like Joker's based on superhero comics. You wouldn't call that a superhero movie, right? Because there isn't a superhero in it.
Yeah, it's a super villain origin story, but also
Superhero
kind of just a drama.
They're not a superhero movie because it's got a superhero in it, but tonally it doesn't match a lot of the tropes of a superhero movie.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great like comic book inspired crime drama, like you guys have said. But yeah, I'm just curious because I know it's a conversation that I see a lot of.
Yeah, kind of what you guys said. It's more of a superhero movie in name, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's Batman.
Well, yeah, for sure.
But and also it's interesting since in this one and Batman Begins, a little bit less so than Dark Knight Rises, Batman is the only person really in a costume, more or less. He's the only costumed fiend out there, really, because...
Well, what I like about The Dark Knight Rises is that a lot of it is just Bruce Wayne's internal struggle, and then like he's Batman at the beginning and at the end. And I really like that. It makes it a very human story, I think.
Because, like, yeah, Batman Begins has Scarecrow in it. He wears you can hardly say it's a costume. Yes, he wears that thing on his head, but that's just more to scare people.
The hallucinogens are his main weapon.
Yeah. And then with Joker, that's less of a costume and more because he's a freaking crazy person. This is what he wears as a scare tactic. And then Two-Face, obviously that isn't a costume. His face burned off. It's not a costume. But Bane, I guess you could say that's a costume. More or less.
They give it
That's the only time where you have another costumed person. But it's weird because we're Batman. So if you look at like stuff like the Superman movies or anything else, or like any other, or like in the Spider-Man movies or any other superhero movie, the hero is not the only one in a cape or a costume. Here he is.
Well, I mean, one thing about Bane in this version is doesn't he like need the mask to like breathe or something?
Yeah, he needs it for the pain and to breathe. Yeah.
No one cared who I was till I put on the mask.
But I know that
because it's hardly a costume.
But yeah, you definitely have a point. I mean, like with the villains in this interpretation, a lot of them are just like people who are a little off, but they're not necessarily like costume wearing, like over the top villains, I guess. For an animated series, I think that works, and it shows that it doesn't work in like Batman Forever and Batman and Robin.
Yeah, Batman Forever was kind of trying to capitalize on the success of the series and was like, let's do it live action.
Moving on to this movie, this is one of the most loved movies of all time. It's number 4 on IMDb's top 250, and it's one of my favorite movies. I was just wondering, do you guys think this movie deserves the hype? And I mean, I would assume yes. But if as well as that, would you guys like to get into talking about some of the other films that came out in 2008 that stood out to you? And I'll share my thoughts on that as well. Well, there are a few that I want to mention for sure.
One that definitely it's same genre, different take, but still obviously a huge impact was I think Iron Man came out in 2008 as well.
Yeah,
and that's interesting. That's a different. It's not a superhero film, but it's a very different type. It's more lighthearted. It's not campy. I wouldn't say that, but again, it's different. We hadn't quite seen that type of hero before. It was obviously not as grounded as Dark Knight was, but it didn't have like the camp of like.
It was the birth of the MCU. So
yeah, exactly.
So pretty pivotal.
That's why it has such a huge impact. It was the birth of the MCU. Also, Dark Knight, for instance, that was more of its own contained thing. But at the same time, you saw other like future superhero movies try to sort of emulate Dark Knight to mixed results. But for the most part, like it really set a precedent, which is because like in the future, like dark superhero movies in general, you always think Dark Knight. That's what they're compared to every time. Yeah, so that says a lot of sort of the impact they make. And as for the other movie that came out in 2008, MCU-wise, it's different. At the same time, I think it also had such a huge impact because that, obviously kickstarted the MCU.
Yeah, well, one thing about Iron Man that I will say is that movie was also very performance-driven. Like, Robert Downey Jr. was just so good in that movie. And I think that's one thing that both movies have in common is that they're very, like, focused on the performances.
Sir, there are still terabytes of calculations needed before an actual flight is a
Jarvis. Sometimes you gotta run before you can walk.
But yeah, Iron Man is great in a different way, but yeah, for sure. Some other movies from 2008 that I really like, Slumdog Millionaire, obviously Best Picture winner. it's my number 2 because I love The Dark Knight, but Slumdog Millionaire is an excellent movie. The first Taken, I believe, came out that year, which I really liked. Obviously not the best trilogy, but great first movie. Wall-E.
I forgot that was a trilogy.
Yeah, Taken is a trilogy, and you're in for a treat if you commit to the whole trilogy. That's all I can say.
Sorry about that, y'all.
It's kind of a mess. There's a movie called Milk that's really good from that year. Yeah, it won Best Screenplay, I think. I think Sean Penn won, right? And the first Kung Fu Panda, of course. Strong year for animation, honestly. We had Madagascar 2, Wall-E, and Kung Fu Panda, which I liked all of those. So yeah, that's but yeah, The Dark Knight is my favorite movie from that year. It's probably my favorite movie of all time if I had to pick one. And I think it deserves the hype. I think it should be number 1 on IMDb. Sorry, Shawshank, but Dark Knight is just amazing.
I know I talk a lot about the Oscars on these episodes or on any episode, but I just wanted to get your take on this, Josh. So, like, as you know, this wasn't nominated for Best Picture. Wasn't nominated for any of the major Oscars except for Heath Ledger getting a supporting actor.
It won 2 Oscars though, including that one.
But like I'm talking like picture, director, screenplay, that kind of stuff.
In a year of striking film images, perhaps the most unforgettable was that of a man with his face smeared in clown makeup, gleefully sticking his head out of a speeding car, relishing the night wind and reveling in the chaos he has unleashed on the streets of Gotham City. Menacing, mercurial, droll, and diabolical, Heath Ledger, as the Joker in The Dark Knight, kept us all on edge, anxious to see what act of appalling mischief he might commit next.
Yep. I mean, they didn't nominate The Dark Knight Rises for a single Oscar, which I think is absurd, but that's just my opinion.
And it is interesting to point out that the year after this, the Best Picture field was expanded from 5 to 10.
Yeah,
and
I'm surprised The Dark Knight wasn't included in. It's crazy to me.
What was nominated that year? Let me look it up.
Slumdog Millionaire, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Milk, The Reader, and I'm missing one of them. Reader, Milk, and oh gosh, I'm missing the 5th one.
No Country for Old. No.
No Country was the year before.
I'm thinking. I'm not 2008. I'm going 2009.
I'm not thinking. How come I not thinking?
Frost/Nixon.
Frost Nixon, of course. Okay.
I haven't heard of like half of these movies.
Yes, so
I've heard of them. I haven't seen all of them.
Those 5 all got nominations. And fun fact, all 5 of those movies also got nominations for Best Director too. Christopher Nolan didn't.
Well, Chris Nolan is pretty constantly like underrated by the Academy.
He didn't get his first.
He won an Oscar?
No, he hasn't.
He didn't get his first. He didn't get his first Best Director nomination until Dunkirk.
Dunkirk was the most well received as far as the Academy and critics goes, which it's also a great movie, but it's not his only great movie for sure.
I know, especially for these kind of movies, the Oscars don't mean much, but I just wanted to ask, like, do you think that The Dark Knight getting snubbed in 2008 was one of the reasons why the Best Picture field expanded in 2009?
Definitely.
I mean, probably.
I think so.
I mean, I also not to hate on the movie too much, but if we're comparing superhero movies, like, okay, Black Panther is not as good as The Dark Knight by any means.
Oh, no.
And it's the best pick. It's like nominated for like 8 Oscars. And, obviously there's other social reasons they did that, I think, personally. But I guess it was a right step. It was a step in the right direction just because at least it was a superhero movie getting some recognition. And maybe in the future, movies like The Dark Knight will continue to get noticed. And Logan got a screenplay nod, I think.
The Oscars in general acknowledge when they're biased against superhero movies. The Oscar voters who won't even nominate a superhero movie whatsoever. No matter if it's movie like Dark Knight.
Usually it's those like technical awards, like visual effects.
Those like the actual major awards.
Yeah, always the technical awards, but never like the big ones. Like Dark Knight was rare as that how it actually got an acting Oscar.
Yeah, supporting actor and a posthumous one at that. So just a really awesome moment. We're getting close to the end here.
Yeah,
and I wanted to ask you, Nikhil, is there anything in this movie that you would change to improve it, or do you think it's perfect the way it is?
As much as I love Christopher Nolan's Batman, some of the combat scenes can be improved. Like, I'm not really a huge fan of Affleck's Batman, but he's had the best combat scene. The Batman Superman warehouse scene is one of the best fighting scenes. I feel like some of the action directing could have been a little better. Because like we've got guys you can tell are clearly just like standing on screen doing nothing, waiting to get punched essentially. That's what I feel like could be improved, honestly. That's what I think Christopher Nolan's improved that as his career's went on. But that was always a big like was that his action directing wasn't top notch necessarily.
Yeah, like the fake voice he does is a little bit much.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I'm able to overlook it because the series has such great storytelling and everything else. But yeah, what about you, Zach?
I think it's a little long. Let's be honest. I mean, I think they used the most of that 2.5 hours, but like, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, that's fair.
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot going on. I'm trying to think of ways because I'm complaining that it's overly long, but then I can't figure out where they would cut anything because they use their time well.
I mean, I think this is one of those. For me, this is one of those movies it earns its length. Everything contributes to the story. But yeah, I can see what you're saying. It is a long.
Right, but one thing it does seem interesting is it really seems it really is like a film that I feel like the two acts are really two very like distinct acts. I feel like before Rachel dies and after Rachel dies. I feel like
that's a turning point in the movie for sure.
Yeah. And for some reason after that, the whole movie feels a little different because the story, it's still connected to like Two-Face, but then it feels like almost feels like a part 1 and a part 2.
Yeah, and also the whole sequence with the hospital is insane too. Just real quick.
Oh yeah.
Because it's another scene where you question the morality of it in many ways.
Joker in a nurse disguise is always.
It's one of those ways that Joker's unintentionally just hilarious.
Yeah,
it just works.
That scene's incredible too. I do wonder, did they actually blow up a building or was that special effects?
Knowing Chris Nolan, they probably did.
Yeah, he hates.
He's like if we can do it without CG, we will do it. That's his mentality. Because I watch a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm not sure if I saw it, but there was one. I don't remember what scene it was.
Yeah, the plane crashing into the building.
That was real. That wasn't CGI. Yeah.
Yeah, that was real. The real 747 just crashing into a building. Moving on, Nikhil, are there any other talking points you want to discuss, or did you have any questions for either of us regarding the movie?
Going back to we were talking about underrated performances. Some of the ones that really get overlooked in the franchise as a whole are Morgan Freeman and Gary Oldman.
Yes.
People forget that these are prominent characters in the trilogy just because of how many other standout performances there are. And I particularly like Morgan Freeman's his sort of arc in this movie.
Yeah, he's a good Lucius Fox.
This is wrong.
I've got to find this man, Lucius.
At what cost?
The database is now key encrypted. It can only be accessed by one person.
This is too much power for one person.
That's why I gave it to you. Only you can use it.
He's 100% not on board with what Batman's doing. He was hacking into every satellite device in the city, and really adds a bit more depth to his character. We learned the extent of what he'll go and what he won't do, for instance. And I really like that.
Yeah, for sure. They're both really, really strong supporting characters. And also, you think Jim Gordon is dead for a solid 20, 30 minutes. So
yeah, 30 minutes of the movie. Yeah, he's dead.
Yeah, that was nice.
Jim Gordon, he's really good in this movie. I think he's probably the best portrayal of him I've seen in any media.
Yeah. Well, the scene near the end when Harvey Dent is about to kill his son, which is insanely dark, insanely intense. It's really chilling to watch because you see a man at his lowest point. Really, it's like begging someone to spare your son's life, and he's like, nah, just lie to your son, and I'm gonna kill him. Basically,
that's actually
it's Gary Oldman does a really good job in terms of acting in this movie for sure. But he's one of the best actors I think out of everyone. He's so good.
Yeah, he's a very, very good actor. He's been underappreciated for his entire career.
Yeah, I'm happy he finally got his Oscar for Darkest Hour.
Oh yeah.
But he's been great many times before that. That was not his first great performance.
Sirius Black. He's Sirius
Black. Yes, sir.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. He's serious.
So our last question before we wrap up today is, if you had to convince someone to watch this movie, what would you tell them?
I would just tell them how this is widely regarded as one of the greatest movies of all time. How it set a stepping point for the rest of superhero movies in general. And also, maybe just tell him how good Joker is in this movie. He's such a captivating screen presence. I feel like his his scenes alone are 100% worth the price of admission. So that's definitely some of the main starting points I would go with.
Yeah, that's fair. What about you, Zach?
Well, I'd probably say that this is one of the greatest and most consequential superhero trilogies ever made. It's consequential in that it really showed how dark superhero movies they can be, and it inspired many others. So you wouldn't have like a movie like Logan, you wouldn't have a movie like Joker, you wouldn't have like even the Justice League and some of the MCU movies and the DCU movies took a page out of the Nolan trilogy of this darkness, and they borrowed from it. So yeah, it's one of the most important superhero trilogies ever, and this is the perfect middle chapter of it, and also contains arguably the greatest portrayal of a villain ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
So yeah, anyone who knows me knows I love this trilogy. I love this movie. It's my favorite trilogy of all time, without a doubt, in my mind. And if you haven't seen these movies, I would happily rewatch all of them with you, with no questions asked. And yeah, it's one of the best superhero movies, but it's one of the best movies. It's a movie, as I said earlier, it's from start to finish. It just has you on the edge of your seat for the whole way through. Heath Ledger is one of the best, gives one of the best performances of all time here. And in general, The Dark Knight is just, I can't say enough good things about it. It's such a good movie. It's a movie that I'm going to continue to watch again and again for the rest of my life, as well as the rest of the trilogy. And, I wait for the day. And something I tell my friends is that I genuinely don't know if we'll see a better Batman trilogy or series in our lifetimes than this series. It'll be tough.
Pattinson's Biopic Rodriguez, this one.
If something, I think at best we'll get something on par if we're lucky. But something better than this series, it will be a truly tough act to follow. But we'll see. We never know. So yeah, that's kind of my sales pitch. This is an amazing movie. Maybe I'm biased, but I love it. And if you don't love it, that's okay. But I don't agree.
Me watching, he takes the knife to her, laughing while he does it. He turns to me and he says, "Why so serious?" He comes at me with the knife. "Why so serious?" He sticks the blade in my mouth. Let's put a smile on that face.
All right. And with that, we're done with our discussion with The Dark Knight. I wanted to thank Nikhil for joining us today. Also want to take a second to commemorate that this is our final episode of season 1. All 20 episodes are now available from season 1 on all platforms. And we wanted to say thank you to everyone who's listened so far. And, we're looking forward to bringing big and exciting things for season 2. And that's a wrap on season 1 of Cinema Convos. From all of us at Cinema Convos, thanks for listening, and we hope you tune in next time.